Now, on to something a little different. We're talking Halloween because the volume of ready-made costumes being sold in the shops is absolutely massive every year. But there's a warning that much of the material used to make them is plastic, and every year that leads to a mountain of waste. Now, new research has come from a charity called the Fairyland Trust, and I spoke to Chris Rose from the Trust.
We started looking at costumes because we run events about nature of kids called Real Halloween, and it's all about nature in the autumn. So we've eliminated as much plastic as possible from how the event's put on and all that sort of thing. And then we've got increasingly worried about the large amount of plastic looking costumes that people were coming in. And we started a survey last year. We've updated it this year. We looked at 19 retailers and some 300 costumes and found that over 80% of the material is actually plastic. Most of that's polyester, but also things like nylon, acrylic, and what's called synthetic, which could be almost any sort of plastic. And if you look at what happens to costumes, it's been found that about 7 million are thrown away each year. And you look at how much the average weight is, it tells you that this means there's probably over 2,000 tons, maybe as much as 3, of plastic waste being generated just by Halloween every year in this country.
Just in this country? That is absolutely staggering, because I was going to say, is that worldwide? But that's just in this country.
Yes, and Halloween, the commercialization of Halloween, it was originally a sort of nature celebration of autumn, if you go right back. And so people had event, and they probably feast and so on. But it was all about nature going to sleep in the autumn. And this has become a big commercial activity, especially boosted by what happened in America and then re-imported into countries like Japan, the UK, Australia, Germany. And lots of people seeing similar problems. If you go into any supermarket now, you see these massive displays of what a lot of people call plastic tat, which is not just the costumes, but also the toys and things. And all that's not included in the survey we've done. And this is what's generating. If you look at Google searches, you can see that this really took off about 5-10 years ago and has got bigger and bigger in the last 5 years.
Yes, certainly. So when I was growing up, we never talked about Halloween. It was something that was just only done in America and so on. But every year it seems to get bigger and bigger and bigger in this country, doesn't it? But just going back to those statistics, 2,000 tonnes of plastic waste just from Halloween costumes in this country. Am I right in saying that that is the equivalent of 83 million plastic bottles?
Yeah, plastic bottles are the size of a Coca-Cola bottle.
Is that the large size or the small size?
No, that's the small normal size. Yeah. And it gives, and that's more than one per person, whether you take part in the Halloween event celebrations or not. And it's avoidable because people can get dressed up and have a good time and look good without having to buy new plastic costumes. I mean, if anyone looks on our website, the fairylandtrust.org, and looks at the dressing up page, you'll see lots of pictures of adults and children using things like throws over that they're wearing, which are like tweedy looking, or other people dressed up with wool, decorating their faces and putting feathers in their hats and things.
Yeah.
Hats
so sorry, Chris, to butt in there, but it's all about thinking differently, isn't it? It's not, it's trying to get away from that sort of knee-jerk reaction of thinking, I've got to have that because that's what's in the shops. It's all about thinking more sustainably.
Yeah, and it's about wearing things again quite often. I mean, often if people look in their granny's cupboards or their mum's cupboard, or if it depends how old you are, you'll find often a lot of the older clothes you've got will be suitable for putting together in an outfit, and they're often quite long lasting and better made. And you get, and even if you kids using toys that they've already got, like cuddly animals or all sorts of things, and being creative, like you say.
Absolutely. Are you lobbying the government about this? Is there anything that you can do?
Well, we're a tiny charity. We've been working with this other charity, Hubbub, and the Women's Institute and Friends of the Earth are also working on plastics. And essentially, there needs to be regulation for better labeling, so consumers actually know if what they're buying is plastic. And then they need to restrict the market, because just left to its own devices, there's such a flood of cheap plastic materials that they're not going to be phased out by voluntary measures. I mean, they're persistent pollutants. They never go away in the environment, and they end up in eventually as microplastic in everything you breathe, eat, and drink. So it needs to be controlled. They need to introduce some sort of regulation to do that, and in Britain and internationally.
Chris Rose from the Family Trust. And there we are. I'd love to hear from you if you are doing something to become more sustainable. Great stuff. I'm just